Today we're going to dissect a flower in order to be able to identify all the different parts, including the male and female reproductive organs. Now, it's possible for you to also dissect a flower if you have one. It may not be a daffodil. You can see this daffodil's one of the very last that I could find. But I'm going to dissect a bluebell in a moment, so you might be able to find one of those, or another flower perhaps you have in your garden. If not, don't worry, you can take all the information in from seeing me do it here. But if you do want to dissect one, you don't need a sharp knife, just a normal knife here will do, and some sort of chopping board to rest your flower on. Now, if you are doing the dissection, there's just a couple of safety things to be careful of, please. Number one, no sharp knives at all, please. Only cutlery knives. And be very careful of your fingers. Don't cut towards your hand. Always hold your hand above and cut away from your fingers. Second thing is, don't put your fingers in your mouth after you've been handling the flower or touching your skin. Make sure you wash your hands after you've done your dissection. And don't obviously eat the flower. Finally, if you are allergic to pollen, you get bad hay fever, you are allergic to the flower or pollen in any way, then avoid doing the dissection itself. Just one other point, don't forget to ask your parents before you take a flower, because I don't want you to pick their most prized and most beautiful flower if they would rather you didn't. So here we can start with this part of the flower here. This is obviously the stem, and then coming underneath there's this strange sort of crispy petal / leaf part. Now you need to know the name of this. This is called the sepal. Now the sepal is the part that covers the bud, protecting the bud before it opens. Then coming up here to the upper part of the flower, the daffodil has 6 petals. And then it's got this lovely inner trumpet, and it's inside this trumpet here that we can see the male and female reproductive organs. Let's start by removing some of the petals, and then we can lay them out, and we're going to demonstrate the parts that we dissect. And if you do it, then you are going to lay them out beautifully and label them like a proper dissection. So I'm going to take this part here off. Do you remember what this was called? That was the sepal. That's the sepal just there. So here is this lovely inner trumpet here. It's amazing on the inside. I can see there female and male parts. Can you see these little yellow parts here? That is, what do you think that is? I hope you said pollen. And that pollen is the male sex cell. It's the equivalent to the sperm in humans. So let's cut the trumpet open and let's examine the male and the female parts inside. Delicately cutting all the way down. There, wow, look at that. Here is the flower. So, this is a brilliant flower, this one. You can see so clearly. We have here these parts here, which have the top here and a long thin part here. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4 in this part here. There are 2 of them. These are the male reproductive organ. I'm going to take these 2 out here. They are called the stamen. It's easy to remember that they're male because the word stamen has got men in it, stamen. Now the stamen is made up of 2 parts, and you need to know the name of these. This long thin part here is called the filament, and the part at the top up here, this is called the anther. The anther is where the pollen sits. This is where the pollen is made. So here we have the anther and here we have the filament. And in total, it's called a stamen. So the stamen there are the male reproductive organs. And inside, with the stamen, here is something different. Can you see 4 stamen here? I'm going to remove each of these. And that leaves here the female reproductive organ. Can you see here? We have this here at the top, this long part here, and then we have this whole area here at the bottom. This whole thing is the female reproductive organ. This is called the carpel. The carpel. It's spelled C-A-R-P-E-L, carpel. This carpel is made up of 3 parts. We have the top part up here. That is called the stigma. The stigma. The stigma is sticky. It's a sticky stigma because it makes a liquid glucose in order to trap pollen grains on top of it from another flower. So there at the top here we have the sticky stigma. Then between that and this area down here is this long part between here and here. This is called the style, the style. And then at the bottom here is an ovary. And inside the ovary are chambers. Those are called ovules. So we have an ovary, and then we have ovules, and inside the ovules are these, which are the eggs. These are the female sex cells, or gametes. The female gametes in a flower are given exactly the same name as in a human. They are called the eggs. Or if you want to use the technical term, they are called ovum. Ovum for one, ova for several. So in here we've got lots of ova sitting inside an ovule, which sits inside an ovary. Then if you can remember, this part here is called the style, and on top here, do you remember what this is called? The sticky stigma is called the stigma. And there is your female reproductive organ, the carpel. Sticky stigma on top, style, ovary with ovules and ova inside. The whole thing called the carpel. So let's lay that down here with the rest of our dissection. So these are the major parts of a flower. We have up here, we have got petals. Over here we have a sepal to protect the bud. Here are the male reproductive organs called the stamen. The stamen are made up of 2 major parts. We have the filament, the long thin part, the filament, and we have the anther at the top here, and on the anther is the pollen. The pollen is the male gamete, or the male sex cell. That carries the genetic information of the male genetic information for a new plant. Then here we have the female reproductive organ here. This is called the carpel. The carpel is made up of 3 major parts. It has the sticky stigma up here at the very top, which is sticky because it releases glucose to trap bits of pollen on the top here. It has a style, which is all the way down here, and then this whole area is called the ovary. Within the ovary there are chambers called ovules, and within the ovules are the eggs. That's these little parts here, and the whole thing called the carpel. So the rest of the video looks at the female and male parts of some different flowers, a poppy, a bluebell, a buttercup and another flower, and it helps you to recognise the male and female parts of those. So if you want to, you can stop the movie there and do your own dissection, or you can carry on and get a few tips about other plants. So let's see if we can spot the parts of a buttercup. The stem, underneath sepal, the sepal. We have the petals here, around here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Only 5 in this case, 6 in the daffodil. And then on the inside here, so all the male parts here, all stamen. In the centre here is the female reproductive organ. Just cutting now through the centre, hopefully into the here. Can you see that? That's come off here. I cut a bit too deep, but it's here. And the ovary somewhere down here. Really hard to see on a buttercup, but if that's all you've got, then have a go. So here's a poppy. You can notice a couple of really interesting features. Have a look at the stem here. See all these amazing hairs up the stem. What do you think they're for? They are to protect the flower, to stop creatures from eating it and stop them crawling up like snails and things. So let's have a look at the flower itself. The second interesting feature of this one here is it's got these internal markings on the petals. Now these are amazing. It's a bit like runway markings. So it guides a bee that's flying past into the flower and down to the critical point here where they want the bee to get covered with pollen as it comes in for its drink of nectar. So we've got our petals here very clear, and this time, do you notice there are only 4? Look, 1 at the back there, 2, 3 and 4. So on the inside here, we've got the male and female reproductive organs. Here are the male reproductive organs. They are the stamen. So let's take out a few of those. There we go. You see there are some long thin filaments on my finger and some anthers, and you can really clearly see the pollen that's coming off those anthers there. So looking now at the female reproductive organ. So here is the beautiful female reproductive organ. Let's see if I can just come down here. Let's cut through. See what we can find. Oh, there we go. Look at that. This is the ovary. There's a very short style in here, so we just got the stigma at the top, almost non-existent style, and a big ovary here with ovules in here, and inside the ovules are all these little eggs. Look at that. And those will go on to become seeds, and the seeds will be contained in this area here. Now I might be wrong in this, but I've always thought that a poppy is called that because the seeds develop in this area here inside the ovary, and there's loads of them, and when it pops open then it spreads the seeds for new poppies. That's why I thought they were called poppies, but I might be wrong. You'll have to find out for me. So here is another flower. This one is a bluebell, and you can see under here, can you see the sepal down here? And then we've got the petals here. So I've separated off the petals here, and along with each petal here is a stamen. I'm just taking one of these stamen off here. Here is the female reproductive organ. Let's have a closer look at that. So on the female reproductive organ, at the top here, this part, the sticky stigma. Here is the style coming down here into the ovary. Oh yes, look at that. You can see in here the chambers, which are called ovules. So the whole thing is an ovary. The chambers are called ovules, and inside the ovules are the eggs. And the eggs will be fertilized by the pollen nucleus, which will come down here. It will fertilize the eggs, and then all these eggs here will become a seed. So this is the last example I'm going to look at, and this one has quite an unusual stigma. You can easily see the stamen here with their anthers and long filaments. But where are the stigmas? Well, here they are in the centre, and they look a little bit different to the others. You can once again easily spot the large ovary, and these are the style here, but the stigma has sort of split apart almost, and each of these ends here are the sticky stigma ends. So here, these parts up the top here are the sticky stigma. This part here is the style, and coming down here I think will be the ovary. So here we can see some eggs down here inside the ovary here. So wonderful, the male and female parts of that plant.